it's not to have a theoretical knowledge. It's not to have a training in history or in economics or in law. It's basically somehow of a gift, of a smell, to understand the nature of the present, he says. To have political judgment is to understand the unique characteristics of the present.
I'm Dane Borges, Director of the Center for Latin American Studies, and on behalf of the Center and the Global Voices program of International House, our host here on the University of Chicago campus, I'm delighted to welcome you to one of our Latin American briefing series on current issues in Latin America. Our speaker tonight is Licenciado Jesús Silva-Herzog. He's Professor of Law at the Instituto Tecnólogico Autónomo de México, ITAM, and he's a graduate in both political science and law from Columbia University. His books include El Antiguo Régimen y la Transición en México, The Old Regime and the Transition in Mexico, the democratic transition that is, Las Esferas de la Democracia. He's a The Spheres of Democracy is the title of that second book. He's a political commentator, an editorialist for the newspaper Reforma, and a member of the editorial board of the political magazine or the Journal of Ideas, Nexos. Licenciado Silva-Herzog was recently Comexi Scholar at the Mexico Institute of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars earlier this year, pursuing a research project on the democratic problem in Mexico. He's currently researching the changing role of civil society's involvement in the Mexican political system. And he has in the works, I don't believe it's come out yet, a book on 5 major political thinkers of the 20th century, Norberto Bobbio, Carl Schmitt, Michael Oakeshott, Isaiah Berlin, and the Mexican poet and essayist Octavio Paz. So it's my great pleasure once again on behalf of the Center for Latin American Studies and the Mexican Studies program at the University of Chicago to welcome Jesús Silva-Herzog.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really sorry that I'm very late. There was a confusion with the way that I was supposed to get here, but I'm finally here, and I'm very glad that you are here also. I would like to try to paint a portrait of Mexico's recent political developments, and to try to understand what's the nature of Mexico's new political regime, new political system, and the great problems that we face in Mexico to make democracy, the reality of Mexico's democracy, something that is both legitimate and effective. I was thinking that if we are now in the year 2004, just 10 years ago, Mexico had a radically different political regime. To understand the magnitude of Mexico's political change, maybe we could turn back the clock 10 years and see the huge differences between our contemporary political structure and what was in existence when Ernesto Zedillo was elected. Ernesto Zedillo was elected. He even said in a clean election, but a terribly unfair election. We could see on TV that there was basically one candidate, one option, and there were a couple of invisible parties and invisible alternatives. And now what we see in Mexico's political landscape is the plurality of many colors in the ideological spectrum, the existence of many of different parties that rule in different regions of the country, a media that it's independent and critical of all political actors. And also, I think that if we want to understand Mexico's current politics, We may also would like to stress the difference between the climate in public opinion now and when Vicente Fox was inaugurated 4 years ago in the year 2000, in the end of the year 2000. I remember then when a couple of months or a couple of weeks before Fox was inaugurated, there was a very interesting poll in the Mexican newspaper Reforma, and it was an outstanding portrait of Mexico's climate, because the majority of the Mexican population believed before Fox was elected that Vicente Fox was going to be able to solve all the problems that Mexico faced in the year 2000. The enthusiasts believed that he was going to be able to solve them immediately, and the skeptics believe also that he was going to solve all the problems, but he was going to take a little while. It was not going to be an immediate solution. But basically, the majority of the Mexican population before the inauguration of Vicente Fox believed that Vicente Fox was going to be able to solve not only the economic problem, was going to be able not only to end corruption, but he was going to solve the inequalities in Mexico, and he was going to be able to solve the drug trafficking problem in Mexico. There was this idea that that the end of the pre-regime was going to be the beginning of this democratic paradise. What we see now in Mexico, in Mexican political climate, is, I believe, an atmosphere of great frustration. If we take a look also at polls, well, we see, for example, that 84% say that Mexico is going in the wrong direction in terms of economic policies, in terms of politics. 77% believe, are worried that maybe next year they're going to be unemployed. And 72% believe that Mexico is losing the war against crime and face this fear of crime in the streets. That comes from a poll from Latino Barometro, this polling service that does this photograph of public opinion throughout Latin America. And it's very interesting because Mexico is shown through these numbers as one of the most pessimistic countries in Latin America. I don't believe that Mexico is the country, one of the countries that is in the worst condition, both in political and economic terms, but in terms of its feeling, of its opinion about the way the country is heading, Mexico is one of the most pessimistic countries in the region. I would try to concentrate on three areas that might be helpful to understand this frustration with the new democratic regime in Mexico. And I would say that these three areas of concern are, first of all, the expectations of democracy. Second, it would be the political strategies of the main political actors in Mexico's political arena, and third, the role of institutions in the lack of results of our democratic landscape. And I would start with the expectations. It was clearly shown through that poll that I talked about recently, the poll that was taken before Fox's inauguration, that we were headed to frustration. When expectations are so high, there's no other way to go than downhill. And I think that this great expectation about democracy has to do with the way democracy was built in Mexico, the way that the Mexico transition was constructed. It was a very long transition. It was not this idea taken from Europe, from Spain, or from Eastern Europe, that democratic transitions are these processes in which history accelerates itself and packs in a couple of years, maybe several months, great historical changes, the inauguration of new institutions, the emergency of a new political class. That is something that did not happen in Mexico. Mexico's political transition was a very slow transition in which there were no changes. There were no important changes in the structure of political institutions. But it was basically the renovation of that institutions through the changes in the electoral process, basically the electoral rules of the game, and also other changes maybe in the area of the media, in the area of unions and civil associations. But I would say that the common idea of this long transition in Mexico was in the discourse, the new official rhetoric in Mexico was the idea that democracy was going to be the solution to all our problems. It was the idea of, for example, the PAN candidate, the idea that with the change in the presidency, with the overthrow of the pre-regime and the birth of an authentic democracy, all our problems were going to be solved. This put a shadow in the nature, I believe, of democracy, which is which is merely, I would say, a solution to one basic, important, crucial problem, that is the problem of legitimacy. Democracy is the only modern solution to the problem of legitimacy. But for all the other issues in politics, I would say it is more of a problem. It is a problem in the definition, in the construction of decisions in a pluralistic structure. And it is also a problem, and it's also a challenge if we are concerned with cohesion, social cohesion. Therefore, our democratic birth, I would say, the emergency of a democracy in Mexico was not accompanied by a reflection on the problematic nature of democracy, the challenging structures of democracy that needed a new type of thought that I believe has not arrived in Mexico. I think there is still a very simplistic idea of political decisions in Mexico in which there are no real concern about the problems of constructing coalitions to build a government, to decide in Congress and to renovate political structures like, for example, political parties. The other issue that I would like to stress is the issue of strategy. If we want to measure, I remember that when you talked about these political thinkers of the 20th century, I remembered one of Isaiah Berlin's thought on political judgment. Isaiah Berlin wrote a piece about the nature of political judgment, and he asks a very simple and very big question. What what is it to have political judgment in politics? And he answered, well, it's not to have a theoretical knowledge. It's not to have a training in history or in economics or in law. It's basically somehow of a gift, of a smell, to understand the nature of the present, he says. To have political judgment is to understand the unique characteristics of the present. Therefore, when we talked about, and he talks about, for example, political judgment in Churchill, well, he has this historical background that permits him to understand what is the nature, the challenges, the forces, the opportunities, the risks of one political moment, the present. If we put this test to Mexico's political class, I would say that there has been no political judgment. And I would focus on the president, the head of the transition, or the aftermath of the transition, the leadership of Vicente Fox. He has not been able to understand the nature of the present. First of all, because I think he misread the meaning of his election. Vicente Fox was elected in a historical election, the first election in which the PRI lost after 71 years of domination, of one-party rule. He was nevertheless a minority president. He was a candidate with less of the 50% of the vote. Nevertheless, he understood that his election had somehow the nature of a plebiscite, that he won. He viewed himself as a leader of a huge national coalition that gave him the mandate to change the country in the way he saw it in his campaign. That was not the case. There were more voters that voted against Vicente Fox than the ones that voted for him. But basically, he misread the nature of his powers, the nature of his constitutional and political strength. And he had the idea that his huge popularity when he was inaugurated was going to be enough to force Congress to do whatever he wanted. So he began his presidency with a strategy of what the American political scientist says, going public. The idea that gathering political and popular support through the media, through the television, was going to be able to push Congress in the way he wanted Congress to head. He started his presidency with both very ambitious and very vague governing program. He started with both highly consensual and highly polarizing agenda, and putting together an agenda that was in some ways very conservative, and in some types of things and in some issues that was close to being revolutionary. For example, he asked in the first months of his government, he asked for almost a constitutional revision, a general reform of the Constitution, because he said this is a Constitution that no longer works for us. This was, I would say, a flawed strategy considering he had a very weak base, very weak political base in Congress, and he was forced to work with Congress. He was unable to construct a strong coalition with, first of all, his own party, and he was unable to construct a fruitful dialogue with the Congress. If we look back to Vicente Fox's presidency, now heading to the third, the last part of his presidency, we would say that it has been a clearly ineffective government, a clearly ineffective presidency. And if we consider his priorities, it has been unable to deliver in any of his priorities. I would underline four, if I was able to underline four priorities of Fox's government, I would say that in the four of them, he has been defeated. Which one are those priorities? Well, he had first this ambition, the idea that he was going to be able to put together a peace accord with the Zapatista guerrilla in Chiapas. And basically what he wanted to do is to pass a constitutional reform, the constitutional reform that was supported, that had the support of the Zapatistas. And Congress, basically through the rejection of his own party, the PAN, rejected that presidential proposal. He had also the idea of organizing a fiscal reform that was also defeated in Congress. He talked enthusiastically through the months that the greatest investment plan of the decade was going to be an airport, that was going to be a huge investment, a public investment. That also was defeated with another scandal. And he had, after that, the idea that he was going to put together an energy reform. If we consider not what we believe that is important to the country, but what he stressed as the priorities of his government, I would say that from four priorities, he has been defeated in all of them. Of course, it's not only the problem of a bad political strategy, of bad leadership, but I would say also the problem with badly designed and badly functioning institutions. Mexico, as I said before, did not have this constitutional assembly after the birth of Mexico's democracy. Mexico's institutional imagination was basically concentrated in the electoral arena, and maybe the only new creature of our institutional framework is the electoral board in Mexico. But there has not been a general revision of our constitutional structure in the structure of the presidency, the Congress, political parties, etc. And maybe one of the flaws that we have nowadays is that for the first time in many decades in Mexico, we have a functioning and a powerful Congress in Mexico. If there is this idea that Mexico had this hegemonic party, as the Italian political scientist Giovanni Sartori called the Mexican party structure, hegemonic in terms that we have had several parties, but there was only one that had real chances of governing. A party structure in which there were, to put it in Orwellian terms, parties that were equal, but there was one that was more equal than the others. There were several parties, but none of them, except the PRI, had the real alternative to govern. That was also the case with the constitutional structure in terms of the presidency. There was a liberal constitution in place from the Constitution of 1917, but there was an hegemonic presidency in that sense. The presidency had the power of controlling Congress, controlling the judiciary, controlling the federal structure through the governors, etc. Democratization has meant in Mexico that the institutions that were somehow asleep in the authoritarian structure awoke in this new atmosphere. And one of the most important institutions that have awakened in recent times is obviously the Mexican Congress. And what we have in Congress nowadays is a powerful Congress, but a Congress that has not the necessary structures to transform itself as a governing, as a functioning Congress. I would highlight I think the greatest flaw that Mexican legislature has, that is the impossibility of a professional legislature. The impossibility, the constitutional prohibition of professionalism in Congress through the prohibition of re-election in Mexican Congress. That anomaly, the idea that congressmen, representatives, senators are not allowed to re-elect themselves or to go to their constituency to get their support after they've been in Congress for a period of time, is something that makes it impossible to have a professional Congress in Mexico. And that is a very important weakness of Mexican democracy in many aspects of our democratic life. It gets away from the citizen, from the citizens, the right to punish our representatives. It prohibits the professionalization of Congress, and it also creates a time framework in which decisions are just decided in the immediate future, and there's the impossibility for the political leadership in Congress to create long-lasting coalitions, to create an atmosphere of trust in Congress, because in the case of the House of Representatives, the Cámara de Diputados in Mexico, the period of time that representatives are in the House is just 3 years. In the time when they are beginning to learn the complexities of writing law, they have to go elsewhere to find a job. So if Congress is this protagonist of Mexico's political life, there is no institutional structure to help Congress to deliver what is expected of it. And then I would stress just another element in our institutional framework, that is our party regime. I think Mexico's political transition was constructed basically with the idea that institutions the rules of the game, the rules of competition, would have to help the political parties to consolidate as alternatives, electoral alternatives. Therefore, there was the opening of the spaces of representation through Congress, through the Senate, through the House of Representatives, in which the idea was to open the doors to the different opposition alternatives in Mexico. There was also the idea that to construct a political pluralism in Mexico meant to help financially those political alternatives and to build a public financing of the political parties. And after that was constructed, after that those spaces of representation were opened to contestation, after public money went to the political parties, the doors of competition closed. So what we have nowadays in Mexico, I would say, is a structure in which we have a guarded somehow of a political structure that is behind huge walls in which they can feel, the three main parties, that are pretty safe from any type of menace. There are no real challenges for the domination of the three main political parties in Mexico. So one of the most important attributes of a democratic regime, that it's the ability of the electorate to punish political parties, to punish politicians, is terribly flawed in Mexico's institutional structure, because the three main parties are not in fear, basically, of anything. They may lose a position in terms of the executive branch, in terms of a governorship, but they have the confidence, the confidence that they won't lose the public financing, and they won't lose the huge place in the representation places in Mexico's institutions. So it has become, through and paradoxically, because of the nature of our transition, our political class has become a class that is extremely insensitive to the demands of the population and to the demands of the population to the political class to deliver what it promises. What I would say to begin the period of discussion or conversation about these issues is that we are facing, I think, in Mexico, the danger of a democracy that has not been able to legitimize itself, and that it's beginning to be threatened by other by non-democratic alternatives. I think Mexico, as other Latin American countries, face the future with weak democracies that are a great political success in many regards, but have not been able to deliver, have not been able to place themselves as governing structures, as structures in which pluralism is able to deliver, that it's able to solve problems. And even the great advances that Mexico has had in political terms in our recent history are somehow challenged nowadays, because even if the electoral arena was the source of pride of Mexico's politics, the change in Mexico's landscape, because if 10 years ago elections were a source of terrible conflict, and after the elections were celebrated, there were huge conflicts and huge protests, I think that is becoming the danger again for Mexico's future. Mexico's recent elections in different regions of the country, in the state of Veracruz, in the state of Oaxaca, have become contested not only before the election but after the election. There have been again the claims of fraud in elections, and we are facing a national election, a presidential election, that might be a very difficult election and a very challenging election for Mexico's institutions. For the first time, I would say, in our history, we are facing a three-way competition in the next presidential election, in which there is not only a two-way race between two parties, but for the first time, I underline this, for the first time we are going to have a three-party race in which there is the questioning of the electoral institution, again, as it happened several years before, in which the one of the main political parties, the PRD, has said that the new electoral board is not trustworthy, and in a climate of deep polarization and political polarization, in which there is almost no real understanding between the different political alternatives. Therefore, I would leave the talk with the concern that Mexico's great political progress in recent history is under threat. I would say because of two main reasons. The first of all, it's because of the inability of the democratic structures to deliver, to perform, to define itself as a governing democracy. And the other threat would be because of the strength of the anti-institutional forces that have gained strength in Mexico in recent history. The idea that institutions, legal institutions, electoral institutions, are not really democratic institutions, and therefore that there are other ways to advance the political agenda of the different political forces in Mexico. Mexico's democracy Mexico has arrived to the democratic territory, but I would say that that area is it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed for the near future. I think that there are important threats to Mexico's political democracy nowadays in Mexico. So I don't know if thank you very much.
As I said before, as a convenience, because we're recording the session, I'll repeat the questions that are being asked, and I'll abbreviate them radically as I repeat them, but of course, Licenciado Silva-Herzog can understand them and will respond to the full question. Well, if there aren't any hands raised, I'll ask a question, but I see some hands raised. In the back?
Actually, it's going to be very complicated if you repeat it.
I will boil it down to 10 words.
Impossible. Impossible, but because I wanted to make three, actually, comments in regard of the
Could you please just ask a question?
One.
Yeah.
On the professional legislature, it is my experience, and you can take a look at it, maybe you haven't, but every politician in Mexico has been in the Chamber of Deputies, in the Senate, as governor, as alcalde or mayor in a major city, as local diputado, as senator here, senator there. We do have professional politicians. I don't think re-election is in any way the answer to the lack of
phrase it as a question, please?
Of Congress. So, elaboration on that. Second, I think this is not going to be the first time that Mexico has a three-way contest. 1988, it was Salinas, Cárdenas, y el Maquillo. If Cárdenas had not been running, Maquillo would have won the election, and the other way around too. If Maquillo had not been running, Cárdenas would have won the election. I think so. That was a real three-way election, so elaboration on that. Third and last, they are not afraid of anything. I think they are. And that's the issue we've been, fighting for I don't know how many years already, the vote of Mexicans from abroad. We are about 20% of the possible electorate, but they don't have any kind of control over this 20% of the possible vote. They give us the right to vote. They don't even know who we are going to vote for. That would make them lose or win seats in both chambers in Congress. We are the wild card, and that's why they don't give us the vote from abroad so far, because they are afraid of what might happen. We are a segment of the society outside of the control of the three main political parties. Completely outside, completely uncontrolled.
Well, if I can boil that down to a question, is there indeed a professional career for Mexican politicians, even if there are term limits that don't allow them to be reelected within the Congress?
Well, I think that's there's reason for that. There's clearly a revolving door that goes from the Senate to the Chamber of Deputies and to the local Congress. I think that happens fairly frequently. It's not. I don't have the percentages right now about what's the percentage of the members of the Chamber of Deputies that have been in another legislative position. It's not that high. But even if that happens, it's not a if they have experience, it is not a professional structure because they are not allowed to accumulate their experience in, say, the Senate, to accumulate the experience as a member of a committee and to build the knowledge that they need to be professional legislators. I think that's a huge problem because if one local congressman goes after that to be a federal congressman, he might not be in the same committee. He is not with the same people. And there is not this professionalization of the congressman in Mexico. There might be in basically the leaders of the parties, the leaders of some committees, some experience, but it's not the basic structure of Mexican Congress. The House of Representatives has 500 members. It is not the majority of them that has an experience as a legislator. Then there was the question of 1988 and the three-way race. I think you have a point there. The domination of the PRI was based in the last phase of the regime on the division of the oppositions, that there was not only one opposition. But I would say that in 1988, the race was basically the race between Salinas and Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas. And after that, it was the race between Zedillo and Diego Fernández de Ceballos. First, the race between the PRI and the left, and then the race between the PRI and the right. But it was not Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas in 1994 was very far behind the PAN. And also Maquillo fell out of from the race when the Cardenismo, when Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas became the opposition leader. That's why I think we are facing a race in the year 2006 in which the race is going to be who gets the biggest third of the electorate. It's not going to be who gets the majority, of course. It's not going to be, I would say, who gets the 40%, but who gets the highest 30% of the vote.
Very quick question. Just one. You label, my name is Rafael Serrano, a TV producer here in Chicago. You label a lot of problems that we already know Mexico has. There was a checklist. My question is, what the Mexican government or the Mexican society needs to do to change that disconnection between the political parties versus the people. They're disconnected, they're disenchanted, and seems to be all the parties are embottled up, racing each other, facing, literally killing each other political, but disconnected with the society.
So to repeat the question is what must be done by the government or by civil society to improve the connection between the Mexican political parties and the electorate or the Mexican people?
That's a very difficult question. I think it's so important that I really don't think I have a real answer. I think the connection is I would say the traditional connection, the traditional connection in terms of democratic structure. to rebuild or to construct that link between the political class and society, Mexican society, I think the ability of the citizens to punish politicians is crucial. And I think we have a very weak power of punishment in Mexico. I would therefore stress the importance of re-election. I do believe that re-election is crucial. Because if you don't have the ability to punish your representative, the representative can do anything he wants to do with your vote. There's no the idea of the electoral contract in which I lend you my voice for a while, but then you have to tell me what you did with my voice, and then I can tell you if I liked it or not. That very elemental, simple idea that bridge is broken in Mexico's political structure. I would say that something like that would help. Obviously, it would not solve the distance between society and politics, because it's never solved anywhere. And there's no democratic structure in which that distance has disappeared. But there are policies that are closer and that are farther away.
Just to follow up on that, that means we always going to have the same problem because we're disconnected. And that is going to cause, I think it's the root of every problem politically, economically, in every aspect of society of Mexico. So, I mean, they don't want to change it because the political regime, they don't want to change. That is the root of the problem. So we need to, as a society, as citizens of Mexico, now with the new reality of free trade, free, for me, it's free and political, economically, socially. You cannot be free on trade only, and political would be independent or isolated.
Mm-hmm.
That's a major problem with Mexico. They have to be connected, all of them, in order to be equal. Otherwise, we're going to be not equal at all. That's my concern. Thank you.
So just to summarize that comment, perhaps more freedoms. So another question back here. Remember?
Yeah, I was just interested in what you're studying in the changing role of civil society's involvement in government, and I was wondering if you felt like the heavy immigration between U.S. and Mexico was a large factor in that, and if so, if you felt like exposure or immigrant experience helped create like a stronger sense of like voting identity, or if it weakened Mexico.
So I think the question is whether the migratory flows between Mexico, the United States, and Mexico strengthened civil society, may have helped to bring about the transition, have changed Mexican politics.
I think Mexico has not recognized, and maybe that has to do with the question that I didn't answer about the political class being afraid of Mexican Americans or Mexicans in the United States. I think Mexico has not realized that the nature of Mexico, the nature of the nation, if I could use the word, has radically changed in terms of becoming a transnational entity. I think we are still under the idea that the borders of the country trap the identity and the society of the nation, and I think that is not, that's no longer the case. And I think we cannot talk about Mexico's society without talking about what is the relationship with the Mexicans that go to or come to the United States, and the relationship between the families that come and stay in Mexico. I'm not sure about what that is saying about the change, but I think that that's a huge factor in Mexico's politics and economics and culture and society. I'm not sure if that's an answer.
In the back?
My question is a little bit connected to this. With so many men coming over into the United States and there in a lack of absentee ballots, how is this affecting the women's political position in Mexico? I mean, are they having a stronger voice now that a lot of the men are leaving, or?
So the question is, do women have a stronger voice in politics as they're a larger proportion of the electorate in regions where many men have emigrated?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I would say that that would have to do with regional politics. I'm not an expert on that. I wouldn't say that has an impact in national politics, for example, in which I would say that it has been a very slow change in Mexico, the way women have been incorporated in political, in leadership positions in Mexico's national politics. I think has been very slow.
Thanks. Let me take 2 or 3 more questions and take the questions all at once, and then perhaps we can end for the evening.
What would you say, Jesús, to those who oppose the re-election of congressmen with, I believe, valid reasons, like, I don't know, Fernando Escalante, who argues that we came from taking the going back to the 19th century and early 20th century, we come from a very strong tradition of jefes políticos, caciques, right? And the risk of sort of going back into that. And my second question is rather a provocation. Will you be reading Leo Strauss on tyranny if López Obrador gets elected in 2006?
Only if he stops beating his wife. Let me take 2 more questions quickly, and
the economic impact of the migrant population to the United States, the Mexican migrant population to Mexico is undeniable. But what would be your personal forecast of the upcoming impact that this population will have in terms of politics, if or when they are allowed into the electorate and the absentee ballot? What would be your forecast for this?
Can you repeat the impact of Mexican American?
The impact of Mexican Americans and Mexicans living abroad in the future of Mexican politics, and the electoral arena will change. How do you forecast these changes taking place? And
so it's a question to forecast the impact of vote in the United States. And one more question.
In Mexico.
Yeah.
In Mexico.
You mentioned that one of the threats to democratic stability is these anti-institution groups, but you weren't very specific about that. So I'm wondering, are you talking about the Zapatistas or the indigenous insurgents? And isn't that maybe a healthy sign in a climate where institutions are obviously not delivering to the population?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to repeat those questions, or could you repeat them as you respond?
I think I have them written
down.
Yeah.
If you just state them so that the microphone can capture them.
Well, the first question was about the criticisms to re-election. I think that's a fair concern, that re-election might recreate these political bosses and regional bosses in Mexico. I think there are two reasonable concerns about re-election. One of those is that one, The second one would be the impact it would have in political parties that would be clearly more less disciplined parties, and maybe that would make it more difficult to create governing coalitions in Congress. I would say both of them might have some truth to them, but I would say that the advantages of re-elections are higher than their disadvantages. I would say, first of all, with the idea of the new caciquismo through re-election, I would say that the regions in Mexican politics where there is no real competition are fairly small. Mexico has become a competitive arena, not only in the big cities, not only in the northern states. It has become a competitive arena in basically most of the territory, even in Oaxaca, for example, where there were elections recently. The election was fairly close between the opposition, the opposition coalition and the PRI, but it was a fairly competitive election throughout the state. I think that was very important. That was, from my perspective, one of the concerns that some places were going to vote 110% for the PRI, and that was not the case. So that shows, I believe, that competition is has roots nowadays in Mexico's politics. On tyranny, I'm not sure if I'm going to. I don't like how he writes, so I think I wouldn't read that. I would have to think what should we read with López Obrador as president. Definitely not his books. Then the second question was the impact of Mexican Americans in Mexico's politics, right? I would say that that's increasingly a factor in Mexican politics. It's not something that will arrive in the far future, but I think there's something that has arrived to Mexican politics. Mexican Americans that go back to Mexico become candidates and are pretty successful as mayors or municipal presidents in the counties in Mexican states. And I would say, I'm not sure how could I put this, but it's clear that that Mexico's politicians would have to look to the Mexican American counterparts or the for campaigning in the near future. I think that, for example, the way that Mexican politicians tour the United States, not to speak with investors only, or to bankers only, or to diplomats, but to speak with their constituents in Chicago, in California. That shows, I believe, that Mexico's political future will be fought in the United States very strongly. And then the anti-institutional question. I don't think that's a good sign. I think it's I think it's important to have an extra institutional politics. I think it's healthy to have society get involved in politics without getting into political parties or without getting into the electoral process. What I think it's troubling is when that becomes anti-institutional. And what I have in mind is concretely, you're right, I was very vague and I didn't put names in that word. I think it's troubling when for example, Andrés Manuel López Obrador has a stand against democratic institutions. That he says, for example, that the judicial decisions might not be, could not be accepted, or how should I say that? Not to comply with judicial decisions because they might be unfair, or to organize a rebellion against Congress and to cancel the deliberations in Mexican Congress, for example. I think those are very bad signs for a democratic structure as weak as Mexico's democratic structure. Because I think that there is still the idea that there are other sources of legitimacy besides elections and besides rules. I don't think that's a good sign. I don't know if...
Well, it just seems that there are so many, you know, in the case of the Zapatistas, these are people that were at the edge, you know, or at the extreme of possibility. So it seems that, you know, there was a moment there where the international community's attention was seized through these alternative means, and attention was brought to a problem that has been, you know, plaguing not just Mexico, but many of the countries in Latin America, not to mention the United States. Where
Let's stop the formal discussion now, and I invite you all to the reception and to continue to ask questions and to continue this dialogue standing up. But first, applause for our speaker with great thanks.